Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene the summit.
They say revenge begets revenge.
And before we begin, let me introduce our guest tonight from Turin, Italy. Joining us, the editor of the Battleground, Mr. Joel Schalit. Hello, Joel. From our Tel Aviv studios, prominent Israeli speaker and influencer, Mr. Hananya Naftali, and Iranian writer, Mr. Ramin Parham. Sorry. Thank you all, gentlemen, so very much for coming on the show today. So our topic will be, in the aftermath of a successful manhunt, yet the immediate controversy that followed once a terrorist is captured, capture or kill. Let's take a deeper look.
They say revenge begets revenge. But should a life for a life always triumph after so many lives are lost? Is the answer to dealing with terrorists so clear-cut when destruction and an inspiration of extremist ideas seems to always follow? 19-year-old Assad Rafai and 20-year-old Sabi Abu Shakir were caught Sunday in a forest just outside Elad in central Israel. After an intensive 4-day manhunt, the two terrorists carried out a brutal axe attack, killing 3 innocent civilians and injuring 4 others. It's a tragedy which has become much too familiar and much too frequent. 17 Israelis have been murdered in attacks since the 21st of March, and 26 Palestinians killed in raids. An increase in terrorism has enraged the voices of many who demand for harsher punishment. History is testament to the cyclical nature of violence. But how can we end the cycle? Justice is vital to society, yet justice can sometimes become a disease. So, when a terrorist is found, does justice ever take on a new meaning? If innocent lives are in jeopardy, do we capture or do we kill?
So let's get to it. When a terrorist is found, capture or kill. Gentlemen, you know the rules. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and then we pick up the debate after. So Hananya, take the lead.
Thank you, Ali. Of course, I think that death penalty is the solution, because in the last few weeks, 21 Israelis were murdered. And let's face it, we live next to radical neighbors that want to see our blood, not our smile. They want to see our funerals, not our weddings. And they hand out candies when Jews are murdered. The same thing they did when 9/11 occurred. So they sanctify death, not life, unfortunately. And you know, the biggest problem is that they don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state on the top of Israel. You know, that's what Free Palestine is all about, from the river to the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes.
So, of course, death penalty is the solution.
Well, we'll pick up on that in a second, but Ramin, take the podium.
Yes. You know, I think that you in Israel, Jewish people in general, in particular, had to face that same fundamental and philosophical and spiritual question related to death penalty when your guys successfully captured Adolf Eichmann back in the 50s, 60s, I believe. And you had to restore, as a special case, the death penalty just for Eichmann. But what we have witnessing over the past several weeks, several months, several decades, the root cause of terror is to be sought in failed states in our region.
And Ramin, let's put a dot here and we'll continue in a tiny bit. Joel, last but not least, take the podium.
I'm not in favor of killing terrorists, because I think that captured terrorists are a lifelong intelligence opportunity for security services to exploit, and that provides more protections for Israelis than not. Killing Hamas leaders, for example, to exact revenge just produces more Hamas leaders. You know, we got Yahya Sinwar after Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. It's just they just get reproduced. There's no solution through death.
Right. Gentlemen, we will get to targeted killings in a second, but I do want us to talk about death penalty a bit longer. Perhaps it's once again our Western attempt to impose our own Western values, and as in those terrorists are heading out to commit those attacks, knowing they might get killed. Some of them even wanted paradise, etc. We all know what the story here. So maybe it's a way for us to quote unquote, of course, feel better. But in terms of the outcome, this is not deterrence. Ramin, yeah.
Yes, we can take them out. I mean, you are doing it in a very successful manner, despite the fact that you have had 17 Israelis killed over the past several weeks alone. But there is no question that the Israeli security apparatus and intelligence apparatus is extremely successful. So have you been able to root out the problem? No. We have to look at where the root cause is. And I believe that particularly in the Middle East, in this vast region called the Middle East, we have a major problem which is called the failed states. There is no functioning state all around you throughout this whole region. Mm-hmm. And we know that these terrorists need the backing of a state which for its own population is a failed one and is a successful one to feed terrorism.
And Hamas to begin with, or the Palestinian Authority to begin with, is an already an in-between kind of an entity. But Hananya, I am curious to hear your take on whether death penalty is conducive, or maybe just again a theoretical idea that will make us again, quote unquote, feel a bit better.
Absolutely. Look, I am a born and raised Israeli. I was born and raised here. I'm paying taxes. These terrorists took action when they decided to carry out a terrorist attack and murder my people, my family, my brothers and sisters. So obviously there are consequences to that. And as a taxpayer, I do not want to pay their stay in prison, their next degree, their next, also the Palestinian authorities paying salaries to them and their families. I'm not okay with that. So in my opinion, it is not about them. It is not about us. It's simply about doing the right thing. When you take someone else's life, you do not deserve to live, to have your own life.
And Joel, you've mentioned targeted killings and obviously calls here in Israel to pursue the killing of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But you've alluded to the fact that cutting off the snake's head does not mean that there's no second in line, and also that it usually generates revenge on behalf of the other side. So if not targeted killing, what can be done?
A political solution to the ongoing crisis with the Palestinians, which has eluded us for decades. That's the only solution. Palestinians of the kind that have been carrying out the attacks the last few weeks, they live in, as was said earlier, essentially a failed state. They have no economic horizons, they have no political horizons, and they're pressured by the occupation. And so they're going to, quote unquote, fall out of line and behave like independent terrorists and do the kinds of things that they're doing. And we can continue to punish their leadership. We can continue to jail their leaders. We can continue to, knock out their leaders. But none of this ever deters them without a political solution in hand. And we have not had political leadership in Israel now for over a dozen years that could actually carry out a proper political settlement with the Palestinians.
But in this respect, do you think that Israel, to an extent, makes a mistake by putting the responsibility solely on Hamas, as in some of the terrorists are not generated or fueled by Hamas, but rather radical Islam, ISIS, etc. And by putting the responsibility on Hamas, Israel is somewhat crediting Hamas and underlining its clout, no?
It's an unfortunate consequence, but I agree with you completely. I mean, the main problem is that Palestinians get radicalized by their circumstances, and the fastest way that they usually do that is through religion. And Hamas does not have a monopoly on Islamist radicalization in the region. There's lots of Salafist streams, particularly in groups in the Gaza Strip, that are vying for hegemony with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And Palestinians have many directions to turn for inspiration. And all we do is empower the main players continuously by forcing them to take responsibility for terrorist activities that they ultimately have no responsibility for, or marginal responsibility for, through incitement.
But, Ramin, liberalism says that, we can agree to disagree, we can talk everything over through reason, but liberalism might work in times of normalcy. This is not normal. We're seeing day in, day out terror attacks. Maybe authoritarian regime should not, authoritarian act, I would say, it shouldn't be so taboo. Maybe what is needed is a swift, decisive action, and not those in-between solutions of demolishing one floor and not full on a house, not shutting the border crossing for 2 days, but for an elongating time period.
Yes, Eli, in many areas of political thinking, I am much more of an authoritarian than a liberal person. I do agree with you that we do need authoritative action. And I am saying the state of Israel is actually doing an excellent job when it comes to authoritative action. You pretty much live in a very successful, very highly developed and secure country, despite the fact that you have had 17 Israelis dead over the past several weeks. But you are a successful state and a secure state. But look at what is going around. Lebanon is a failed state. Jordan is flooded with migrants, right, and is struggling with apparently some political, dilemma related to taxation. Iran is a failed state. Syria is a failed state. Iraq is a failed state.
But a successful state needs to carry the blame in many instances. Before we take a break, Hananya, briefly, if you can, a major uproar here in Israel, including the widow of one of the victims, as documentation of the capturing of the two terrorists showed one of them getting a cigarette lit while handcuffed on the scene. Can we blame the outrage?
Absolutely not. It made me, as an Israeli who served in the Israeli army, very angry. And I have been reading on social media and talking to my friends about it today. This is what we Israelis have been talking about this whole day, how outrageous it is that not only that they murdered people, they left 16 orphans, these victims. And what do we go into? Light them a cigarette? We say salam alaikum to them as if they are guests in this country, and as if it's like, what do you want to do? You want to give them the red carpet? It's just outrageous. And I think that I don't want to imagine what the family the families of these victims were going through when they heard about it and when they saw